Today we're looking at another picky point of punctuation, the comma. By now, most of you all may have seen this cute little sign on the internet or in a classroom. Let's eat grandpa, the first one, or let's eat, comma, grandpa. The tagline to it is punctuation saves lives. So let's use our commas correctly there, people. What's the fuss about this comma thing? Students tend to either avoid the comma completely or place it in the sentence after every few words. Commas do serve a legitimate purpose, but please, use them correctly. Why do you even need to use a comma? What's the big deal about it? A comma separates parts of a sentence, not one sentence from another. Joining two sentences with a comma without a conjunction equals a comma splice. One thing that I found was helpful to remember about for the conjunctions is an acronym called FANBOYS. I know it might sound a little bit weird, but you can remember it. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Use those conjunctions with a comma. Use a comma between two complete clauses connected by a coordinating conjunction. As I mentioned, the FANBOYS. Here's an example. He frowned, comma, but she did not understand why. Use the comma after a phrase or a dependent clause occurring before the subject of an independent clause. Example. After the noisy party, comma, the neighbors complained. I see this quite a bit in student papers. People will forget to put a comma after the clause that comes before, during the clauses. Before and after information is inserted into a sentence, setting off a clause. Here's an example, and I see this also quite frequently used incorrectly. My father, comma, a computer programmer, works late at night. Put them around a transitional expression. For example, the ending of Twilight, however, is disappointing. Between three or more items in a series. Example, Jack brought home eggs, bacon, and bread from the store. That's one I see quite a bit often in student papers as well, is people will forget a comma in part of that series. So just remember, if you have items in a series like eggs, bacon, and bread, put the comma after eggs, after bacon, and before the and. In journalism, however, you will notice in newspapers that journalists do not use that comma before the word and so that can be confusing if you come from a journalism background or if you read a lot of newspapers. But in English writing, always remember the comma. Also, you need to use it after a verb that introduces a quotation. For example, Scarlett held the bitter turnip in her hand and exclaimed, comma, I'll never go hungry again. Always, always, always use it after the verb that introduces a quotation. I cannot tell you how many times I see that incorrect. Say no to the comma in these cases. Between subjects and verbs. The gorilla sitting in the corner of the cage stared at us. I have seen people put a comma between gorilla and sitting. That is incorrect. Do not do that. Not before a part of a compound structure that is not an independent clause. You can see the example there. This is correct. She won the trophy and accepted it graciously. Not after a coordinating conjunction connecting two independent clauses. Remember, before it. Example, the movie tried to be engaging, but it failed miserably. Don't put it after the word but, put it before the word but. Not before two independent clauses without a coordinating conjunction. Either make a new sentence or join with a semicolon instead. Here's an example. He won, semicolon, she was delighted. You can either use the semicolon or you can make that into two sentences. It's just your writing preference, what you prefer. Not to separate an independent clause from the following dependent clause introduced by after, before, because, if, since, unless, until, and when. No comma appears either before or after the subordinating conjunction. Here's an example. She will continue working for the city until she has saved enough for school. Some people would have a tendency to put the comma in between city and until, and that is incorrect. Not before a clause beginning with that. They warned us that the meeting would be difficult. You notice that there is no comma in that sentence. You don't need it before the clause that begins with that. Not before essential restrictive information. For example, the player who scored a goal became a hero. You don't see a comma around between the player and who, and then after the word goal. You don't need a comma in this sentence at all. Not between a verb and its object or complement. For example, the best gifts are food and clothes. Not after such as.